Hello guys, welcome to Daddy Share Space and welcome to my channel. So today I just made one of my most difficult purchases. This was a difficult one. It was very hard. As you can see here, this is the Festool 201 778 hose with sleeve. It's 10 meters, which is about 32 feet. As you can see here in the image, you've got your power cord on here, and then you also have, the hose itself. It's got a sleeve on it. It's not the braided hose that you get with the vacuums. You can see it here in this image as well. So the reason why this was such a difficult purchase for me is because this is $415, and I went ahead and pulled the trigger today. And as you can see, it says currently unavailable. It said that there was only one left, and I just went ahead and bought it earlier today, simply because in my shop, I do have the CT MIDI 18 volt, and I have the CT 48 vacuum. And the MIDI, being that it's battery powered, you can't plug it into the Capex 120, but the Capex 120 can plug into obviously the CT 48. And what I noticed is the hose that's on the CT 48, the one that came with it, is not long enough to, well, it barely sits outside of the wings of the Capex UG stand. And so as a result, really I need to have a dust extractor that sits under the rail so that it can sit, be closer. But I've had times when I wanted to cut a long board in the garage shop and the dust extractor is kind of in the way. I got to kind of finagle it a bit. And, you don't want to, when you buy high-end tools, you don't want to be, putting undue pressure on joints and different things. And so like at one point I had the vacuum turned facing the back of the Capex, like it was sitting where the buttons and stuff were kind of pointed towards the Capex and not pointed out where I can easily access it. And the problem with that is when I have sustainers up under the UG stand, when I'm trying to reach back there to unplug the Capex to plug in, say, a sander or anything like that, it's a little bit of a challenge. And the other thing is, because my shop is obviously getting a little bit claustrophobic, and when I have the CT48 back behind the UG stand, one of the wings, when I have it in that position, it makes it more challenging to use it with any other tool in the shop, whether it be the sander, if I want to use it with, say, the cleaning kit, because the hose is just not long enough, and it's just more of an ordeal to have to pull all that stuff out. Now, it's a different story, like say if you have an open space and you can wheel your vacuum around. My shop is usually I have to set it up for each individual project and system, and so as a result, things don't tend to flow in the way that I would actually like it to. So what this hose is going to give me the ability to do is, it's still going to create another problem, but it is going to give me the ability to leave the CT48 where I have it parked, and I will be able to take this longer hose and stretch it pretty much anywhere in the shop. If I need to vacuum, if I need to sand on the other side of the shop, because sometimes I have my shop table set up where one is further away, and I don't want to have to kind of, play bumper cars moving the vacuum back and forth to try to utilize, whether it be a sander or even if I'm using like a track saw and I want to use the vacuum. So this is going to give me a lot more flexibility. A lot of things that I think people don't really consider when they're looking at, say, the Festool system and like the dust extraction. It's like, I'm glad that Festool uses the plug that you can plug in front of the AC powered dust extractors, and I'm also glad that you have the ability to use Bluetooth. But sometimes there's a little bit of a challenge when you start talking about, like, if I'm using a battery powered tool and I change the battery, I have to go to the dust extractor and reconnect it. And so even though it's convenient to have the ability to be able to change things around like that, it can sometimes also become a challenge or a deficit when you realize that every time you turn around, you have to reprogram this thing or repair it. I've seen that the most with with my table saw, which runs through batteries fairly rapidly. It's like I'll start cutting and I'll be doing what I'm doing, and then, you know, when I change the batteries, I won't think, go over to the dust extractor, hit the pairing button so that you can repair, the machine, and so then I'll start cutting, and then dust is everywhere, right? So to kind of counteract that, I'm trying to mentally plan. I think at some point in time, I'm going to get another dust extractor that's AC powered, and it is going to be probably the primary dust extractor for the Capex 120. And then what that will do, and the reason why I can't use the CT48, at least in its current configuration, is because I have the Cyclone. And the Cyclone makes it sit too tall to sit underneath the UG stand. And as I spoke before, the UG stand is so wide that, and you can't get the full capacity of use because the Capex cord is not that long, right? I mean, of course, you could plug in an extension cord and run it all the way out, but then you got to be worried about tripping over cords. So I think the best solution would be to get a shorter vacuum to put underneath the actual UG stand. Now, getting back to the hose, I've had this hose on my mind for a while because I realized the benefits that it brings. It does have the plug in there so that you can run any tool, and with it being 32 feet or 10 meters, so I built that new work surface, and so like if I put a piece of wood there, I can actually sand on top of that across away from where my Capex is, and I don't have to move the dust extractor at all. Now I still do have to plug and unplug. That is a challenge, but I'll also try this hose where maybe I'll leave it plugged in and kind of coil it up behind the Capex UG stand. I'll see if that works, and see if I still get adequate dust extraction at the Capex. And if I do, and if it works out, I'm not sure if it will, then when I go from tool to tool, I'll just pull it off of there and then stretch it to whatever I need. Now, there's still going to be that minor challenge of having to unplug from the front of the machine if I'm going to use the power cord, and switching between the Capex 120 and not. That's what's probably going to make me end up at least getting one more dust extractor. And as far as that, I'm back and forth between either getting the Capex the Capex no, I'm back and forth between getting the CT36, which comes with the hose for the Plane X, which I do plan on getting in the future, or getting just a CT MIDI specifically for the Capex 120. Now, the difference in price, if I did get the CT36, it would be the AC, the auto clean one. And so that's like $935, whereas the CT MIDI corded is about $679. Now, I might as well go ahead and touch on the topic. The CT MIDI battery power, it has its use. It is a very niche device. It's basically for like if you don't have power. But just being 100% candid, I think that the fact that I'm always in my garage shop and not going out on location somewhere, I probably would have been better served buying a corded CT MIDI that could have been, that also would have had the ability to be activated by Bluetooth, but also that I could have run off of mains power because, as it is, I think I only have about five. I either have 5 or 7 of the 5.2 amp hour batteries. It's an odd number. It's not even. And I realized when I would be working on a project and I would be switching between using the Capex 60, the TS55 track saw, and then the vacuum and the table saw, I find that things are lacking. It's not a smooth workflow, and so that's where I'm happy that I did get um, the Capex 120, because it takes the miter saw cutting capability. It makes it to where I don't have to use battery power for that. And so that leaves more battery power for the table saw, which does not have the option to use a a cord. And then that's also too one of the reasons why I am probably going to get the TS55 corded track saw. That will also lighten the burden on the battery usage. At that point, I would probably be using the TS55 corded or cordless more so for like long rip cuts and just use the dust bag. Or with this hose, I can actually still use dust extraction and have more range. And then for like more stable cross cutting, I would probably use the corded TS55. Now I could use the corded TS75. However, if you have experience with that saw, it is a lot heavier, or the difference is significant enough to where you would be less fatigued if you had the TS55. And to be honest, going back to what I said in saying that this was a difficult purchase for me, is because I had the money to get either or. I could have got the track saw. I could have went and got it, tomorrow, from my local woodcraft for 629. But as I said, I looked on here on Festool, I mean on Amazon, and they said that this hose, they only had one left for now. And then also, I looked at Hartville Hardware, and they said they only had two left in stock. And as you guys know, sometimes things go out of circulation. And I do believe, it's quite obvious I have multiple track saws, so I don't really need the TS55. It's just more of a luxury or a convenience, if you will. And so this hose is actually going to provide a lot more functionality for me. And I did also consider the boom arm. I did. I thought about that. I considered it. But the reason why I haven't gone with that as of yet, it is something that I would like to get, is because my shop is so much in a state of flux. I'm having to move tables around and shift things a lot, because I'm switching between doing auto mechanic stuff and then woodworking stuff and then general um, you know um, garage, I guess, cleaning, if you will. Not really cleaning, but I'm trying to come up with the perfect solution where I have the ability to access the mechanical tools for the car. Because as the way my shop is right now, it used to be that I could pull the car in the garage and work on it in the garage. In its current state, I can't do that right now. I have a whole lot of organizing that I have to do in order to get back to that point. And every time I try to decide on one particular setup, it ends up leaving me without access to other tools that I may need. So I may be chasing something that's not possible, but I have not given up as of yet, because I idealistically I would have a complete garage just for my mechanic tools and working on the cars, and have to be able to put the car in the garage and do that. And then I would have a totally separate location for my woodworking DIY type stuff. But right now it's always a state of flux and transition. I have a couple of tubs that are full to the brim with a bunch of paint supplies. Some of it automotive paint, and then others, regular for like, painting walls and houses and stuff. And so I need to figure out how to, I want to get the stuff out of the tubs and have it in a way to where I can actually get to it. Because before, the way I had the shop set up, I had my lumber cart set, and a whole bunch of stuff that, that I needed was on the back side of the lumber cart. And since I still had lumber on the floor, I found myself having, like, sometimes it would take like several hours just to move the wood from one side to another. And I debated multiple times about going ahead and building a whole nother lumber cart, even though my space is shrinking. but it was only going to be temporary so that I could kind of get behind things and move things out of the way. But I'm, like I said, I don't have the final solution, but um, I'm just hoping that this hose is going to at least provide some degree of functionality to where I can have, let's say, my big MFT on one side of the shop, or like in one area, the newer tabletop that I put in a different area, and then have access to be able to get to each capex and the table saw and reach it with this hose while leaving the CT48 in the same location. That ultimately, it may not work out exactly how I would like, but I'm hoping it will. And I'm even thinking about maybe making some kind of an apparatus where like if you go to a car wash, they would have these arms to where you could drape the power spraying hose and walk all the way around the car. I was thinking if I could find some kind of a centralized location in the garage where, if the hose is long enough, because it may not be long enough for this, where I can kind of pipe it up and then have it reach any tool in the shop. That would be nice. That would be nice. But like I said, the more expensive solution would be, for me to utilize the Capex 120 with another dust extractor, either the 36 or a CT MIDI without a cyclone on it, so it can sit underneath. And then I'm still not sure about what I would do with between the Capex 60 and the table saw, because I like the fact that I put the table saw on that rolling stand, because I can position it however I want to position it, and it makes it easy to get to the vacuum port. On the flip side of that coin, the Capex the Capex 60, what I've come to find, has been a bit of a bump in the road, because I have the saws, like the Capex 60 is facing one of the garage doors, or the back is to one of the garage doors, and then the Capex 120 is perpendicular to that along a wall where it has access to mains power. So because the Capex 60 doesn't need mains power, I can put the back up against the garage door without having to run a cord. Now the problem with that is when you start dealing with dust extractors. So I could use my 18-volt dust extractor with that setup and just have that going full time, but that doesn't really offer a solution for when I want to use the table saw. I would have to basically disengage it from the 60 and then pipe it to wherever I want to go with the table saw. And then, that is all relative to, like, when you start talking in infeed and outfeed, right? So if I turn the table saw facing away from the Capex 160 and try to run it that way to try to leave the CT MIDI in place, what that's going to do is make it to where it limits my infeed, because the hose, right? Another solution I've considered is, like, on that on that table saw little rolling trolley that I made, I can add an extension to the side and take the 18-volt CT MIDI and set it on that extension, and pipe the vacuum into the back of the table saw, so it would make the footprint wider, but it would not make it taller. And that would give me the ability to where I could move the whole thing as one device, and always have dust extraction for that. Of course, that setup would require 4 batteries. It would be extremely mobile, but then again, that doesn't really help me with using the Capex 60. Now, you may have a question and wonder, well, how am I using both of my miter saws? And that's a good question. The way that I'm using both of the miter saws is essentially what I am doing is I had I had one of those one of my pieces of shop furniture in the shop that was a little bit higher than the rest of the tables in the shop. And so what I did is I took it all apart yesterday and I cut it down to make it the same height as my MFT, right? And in the process of doing that, I noticed, so first and foremost, I once I took it apart, I got the bright idea that, because I had put it together with just 2 by lumber, but I didn't cut off the rounded edges, I decided, oh, let me spiff it up a bit and cut off the rounded edges. So I used the CSC 50 table saw to cut off the rounded edges, which I didn't think this through. It changed the dimensions of the base to where basically I couldn't use the same wood to put it back together. So that meant that I had to go find another board that was long enough for the length portion, and I cut those down to length with the miter saw. So let me back up a little bit. Once I took the stand apart, I took I had to take measurements on the height, and I am going to do a video showing you exactly how I use the benchdogs.co.uk. It's I can't remember the name of the device right now, but there's a device that I bought from them that I use, and I use it in conjunction with the woodpecker's ruler to actually measure out the exact height of the table so that I can match everything up. I'm going to do a little video over that, but I have to clean up the shop so I can give you that angle so you can see it without being totally blinded by the mess. But so what I did is I got the measurement, and I took the 4 height legs. Once I got the measurement, I went over to the Capex 120 and I set my end stop accordingly. So I cut off the tip to make sure I had a square edge, and then I pushed it up against the stop, and I left the stop where it was, and I cut all 4 legs at the same time. Now I left it like that because I was like, okay, I may need to change something else. So I left that stop. That was like on, say, the right side of the 120. Well, then when I was cutting the cross sections on the shorter end, those did not change in diameter. They actually got smaller. And so I took that to the Capex 120 and I set up the end stop on the left side. And I cut all 4 of those parts. And so I basically had the height of the legs on the right side of the Capex 120. And I had the width of the or the depth of the cart that I caught. Those pieces I cut out on the left side, so the stops were set right where they were, and I didn't move them. And so then when I had to go back and recut the long portion, the width of the front, the brace across it, which it actually gotten shorter because I trimmed off the rounded edges on both sides of the 2x4s on all 4 corners, which, like I said, changed the diameter. I went over to the Capex 60, and I used the same mechanism with the bench dogs device and the ruler, and I got that other measurement. And once I got that other measurement, I took that to the Capex 60, and I set up on the left hand side that cut, and I made that cut. And so basically it's like more of in my opinion, it's like a manufacturing technique. If I was using the same wheels that I had on the bottom of that cart and the same plywood and the same whatever, because I left all of those stops exactly where they were, I could have got the exact same measurements. Or like, say one of those pieces of wood, maybe a chunk got cut out of it, or maybe when I was screwing it in, like sometimes you work with pocket holes, you can damage something and it doesn't work out. If I wanted to recut those pieces, I would not have had to do a remeasurement. I would not have had to try to wing it. The stops were already set. And there have been times in the shop where I've had all 4 stops on both, the 2 on the Capex 60 and the 2 on the 120 set to different dimensions while I'm doing a project. It's very similar to, I do the same thing with the table saw. Like, I will set one table saw to a certain depth or measurement, and then I'll set another one to the other, and so I don't have to change it, because I find that because I'm doing a lot of projects out of my mind and not on not from like schematics, basically it's better for me to make sure I make all my cuts at the right time. But sometimes I forget or I miss a step, and so then having those tools set as they were in the beginning really helps me to get repeatable results. And I've actually seen a grave improvement in my workflow and process. Like it may not have shown up so far, like when you guys see my videos, when you see the things that I build, but from my side, trust me, I'm seeing these little micro improvements. And every time I work in a shop, it just makes me feel like, okay, what can I do to make this process better? Because the other day when I was throwing together a little table for my wife in her room, in her office, I we were both sanding, and because the hose, as I was talking about with the CT48, was so short, it was difficult for me to get that sanding. And at that time, I think my MFT had a whole bunch of stuff on top of it. So both of us were sanding two pieces of wood on my Festool MFT, which is a smaller work area. And I was on one side trying to reach around the rail to sand and stretching from the CT48, whereas my wife was working with the CT MIDI 18 volt on the opposite side of the table with the cordless sander. And so it just made me think, this could be better. This could be a better workflow if I give myself a little bit more range, because I don't know how it is for you in your shop, but like say, one of the reasons why I built another bench with the work surface is because oftentimes, everything seems to accumulate on all these flat surfaces. And like, especially when you're in the middle of a project, it seems like you just never have enough, you never have enough hands and you never have enough room. And so as I build more room and more tabletop, like as I was doing the legs on the stand that I cut down yesterday, I was thinking, oh, I can sand these up and make them look even better. But when I thought about all the steps I had to go through just to get the sander working, and the fact that right now I'm like stepping in between, carts and tools, it's like an obstacle course. And I just need to do better at coming up with a better work solution that's going to give me a smoother flow. I feel confident that I'm going to get there. And I'm very happy that, this is one of the benefits to like me buying these tools and owning them myself. I can take as much time as I want to try to figure this out. And when I do get it figured out, it's going to work out great. And then I'll be able to, share that, information back with you guys, and you can be like, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, or, it's a terrible idea. But regardless, I get to work through that process at my own pace. It's not like, like a gym membership where, when you pay into it, it's like you got to get everything done there or you got to pay more money. Once I bought the tool and it's in my shop, that's it. Like I pulled the trigger on a $415 hose. I think it ended up being like $450 with tax. But now that I bought it, that's it. You know what I'm saying? It will add functionality to my shop. It'll add flexibility to my shop. And, hopefully if I don't damage the cord, I don't have to buy it again. So anyways, guys, I want to thank you for taking time to listen to the video, and I'll see you in my next one. Take care.